So this is a new KESS 3. When you open in the case, make sure you press the spring here to open the case. So in the case you've got your power adapter here, which is a changeover from the last power adapter. So the previous power adapter from Alientech was like 2.5, 3 amps, and on some ECUs like the Siemens ECUs it wasn't powering them up enough, which created issues when you was trying to read them. So this now runs around about 4.5 amps, which is sufficient. If you're running this on an extension cable, it should be sufficient power on the adapter to power up the ECU. So it's an improvement from the K-tag of the previous model. Here you've got the power adapter option to connect to a battery. So this plugs into the Alientech K3, and this can go either onto a battery or, better still, onto a bench power supply unit. You can set the voltage or what you want to set it to and the amperage to, and power up. The actual unit itself is rated for 12 volts and 24 volts, so it's not going to overpower it if you're working on truck ECUs if you run 24 volts through a bench power supply adapter using this cable. In this section you've got a USB connector which goes into the USB port here and goes into the laptop. In this section you've got the OBD cable. So it's a new OBD cable specifically for the Alientech. You can't use the old version cable with the new version KESS. So the cable connector goes into the front of the K3 box, and you tighten these up to make sure this doesn't fall out. You've got a little place to put your thumb to press it in and out, and you've got a metal connector just here, which will allow that a bit of movement as you're putting it in and out of the OBD port. The difference with the new cable on the K3 from Alientech is that on the previous model, on the KESS version 2, KESS V2, you would need separate cables, different cables depending on which models you was working on. So there was a separate cable for Honda, a separate cable for Lotus, Toyota, and each of these OBD cables had different pin-out configurations on the OBD port. And now the new version, it's one connector for all models. So on the Toyota, Lexus, Honda, and the Subaru and the different cables that you used to have to buy, now it does internal switching on this DB25 connector here. So on this connector inside, when you select as a Volvo, it changes the pin-out configuration inside, and then it runs through the standard cable to save you having to buy multiple cables. In this section you've got different connectors for the different EU and the rest of the world. If you want to swap over to a different connector, you get the adapter pull down on this little tab here, and this comes off, and then you can put the new one in. You put the edge against here and then press down, and that clicks in. To remove it, put it back up and swap over if you're working in different countries. So the that's back in. Last couple of parts you've got is this one, which is the service mode or the bench connector, edge connector. As you can see on the KESS itself, you've got USB connector input, power input from the power adapter, just plug into it from the wall, and then on this side OBD connector for this cable, and this is the connector for this one. So this just pushes in, you push the connector in and it clicks in, so it can't come out again. On this side you've got just holes here for you to put the relevant cables you need. So in the K3 software it'll give you the pin-out diagrams built into the software, and we'll show you some videos on that later. To get the connector out, you press down on this little compressible bit there, and that allows it to come back out. The last connector on the far left is here, and that's used for these connectors here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, and these just make sure, just like the old K-tag, make sure these are open, and make sure the little indentation that you've got there fits on this side. So this side's completely flat, and on this side you've got a little indentation here. That slots into here. When you press it in, they lock off and keeps the cable secure. To remove the cable, pull these two apart and pull it back out. So most commonly what you'll use on the K3 is the OBD cable and the bench service mode connector. Most things are covered under OBD. If you are working with the service mode connector, you click it in the right way around, make sure it can't come out. You get your diagram from the K-Suite software. It's a completely new software to what you used previously. And this is the wires. So before we would have these connectors on the K-tag on this side, but on this side we would have a plug that went into the K-tag on the previous model. The problem with that is on the previous model, these can become worn out, and then you have to replace the whole cable. Now with the new cable, these are individual, so they're completely individual. If one breaks, say for instance this green one breaks, and this becomes loose and not connecting to the ECU block connector on the ECU side very well, then you can just change the one green one without having to buy the whole cable. So what you do is you find the green one here, and it's also listed. Say for instance you are colourblind, and it will say CAN L, CAN low, which tells you which one to put it on the software. You slide the green one to the green one, so that's nice and connected, and then you connect that to the ECU. And you follow the diagram in the K-Suite software for whatever you need to put in. This way you're not having extra cables hanging about. With the old KESS, with the old K-tag, you'd have all these cables coming out, and they could touch the ECU metal, it's construction of the ECU, and spot the ECU out. Now you've only got cables going to the ECU that are going into the connector. Anything that you don't need can stay out of the way, and you only put the ones in you do need. When you're removing it, you can pull the cable back out, press down on the connector, and that will wobble out. And if it's got its place to go back in, to pack it away. So yeah, it's a much better model than the previous version of the KESS and the K-tag. It does OBD, boot and bench. It does trucks, tractors, cars, vans, jet skis and boats. So there's not much missed on this new version. It's got new functionality, which we'll cover in later videos once it becomes released. But there's a lot of new things in this new K3 software and hardware that will change the market. Lastly, just on here, you've got ECU1, so that's an indication light to say the ECU's on. Key on for ignition. Power is just for your bench power supply, and data is when data is being transferred, this will flash. It's got built-in Wi-Fi, built-in G sensor, much faster USB drivers, so it's actually 10 times faster on the USB compared to the KESS version 2. So it says it in the brochure here. Lots of new functionalities of the doing OBD, bench and boot. We've got options for master and slave, and the actual circuitry itself. New CPU for the actual tool. Lines of communication, which will be the same as before, but it's working with CAN bus and J1850 and all the other communication algorithms, so it can work with a broad range of vehicles. Protected towards the future, so it's got GPS built in, accelerometer, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi built into the actual main box itself. so that will help with more stable internet connection and better performance. So it's 10 times faster, increased power over the previous model. So yeah, it's a really good software. New releases will be coming out for it month on month, and the version 2, they run that for like 12-14 years, so we expect the same sort of lifespan with this, at least sort of 15 years. So it's a tool that you can have for a long time, and we'll keep releasing new softwares.